Me, John the Taxidermy Witch, and we're going to sit down and we're going to read some scary stories to tell in the dark. So I'm really excited, and I hope you are too. We're doing chapter 2 right now. So come join me and grab a cup of tea. I have, since we last chatted, buttered my crumpets with some Kerrygold butter, and they're excellent now. My tea could use a warm up, however. Next time. Okay, so we're on to the second chapter of this book, which is Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, collected by Alvin Schwartz. I say collected by because they're old folk tales that he's kind of updated and revised. And then drawings by Gammell. And again, some of these drawings I am fond enough of that I've wanted a tattoo since I was like reading them when I was 15 years old and thinking about tattoos. I've been reading these since I was 7 years old, but when I was 15 I was starting to think about how cool the drawings were and how I wish I could have them on me. Alright, so the first chapter says, there are ghosts in this chapter. One comes back as a real person, another takes revenge on his murderer, and there are other strange happenings, okay? So the first story is called The Thing. Super creepy good art. And let's have a read. Ted Martin and Sam Miller were good friends. They spent a lot of time together. On this particular night, they were sitting on a fence near the post office talking about one thing or another. There was a field of turnips across the road. Suddenly, they saw something crawl out of the field and stand up. It looked like a man, but in the dark it was hard to tell for sure, and then it was gone. But soon it appeared again. It walked halfway across the road, and then it turned around and went back into the field. When it came out a third time and started toward them, then it came out a third time and started toward them. By now, Ted and Sam were scared. As like they weren't before, you know. They started running. Sorry. But when they finally stopped, they decided they were being foolish. What? Why are you being foolish? There's something that is appearing out the middle of a field that looks all creepy and gangly. Oh, but we're just being foolish, boys. Okay. They weren't sure what had scared them, so they decided to go back and get a better look. Ah, that makes loads of sense. Got it. Pretty soon they saw it, for it was coming to meet them. It was wearing black pants, a white shirt, and black suspenders. Sam said, "I'm going to try to touch it. Then we'll know if it's real." Beautiful logic, Sam. I mean, crisp and on point. He walked up to it and peered into its face. It had bright, penetrating eyes sunk deep into its head. It looked like a skeleton. Ted took one look and screamed, and again he and Sam ran, but this time the skeleton followed them. When they got to Ted's house, they stood in the doorway and watched it. It stayed out in the road for a while, then it disappeared. A year later, Ted got sick and died. Toward the end, Sam sat up with him every night. The night Ted died, Sam said he looked just like the skeleton they saw that night. Oh, creepy. That is a good one. Okay, the next story is called Cold as Clay. Let's read it. Oh, that cuppa is so good. A farmer had a daughter for whom he cared for more than anything on earth. She fell in love with a farmhand named Jim, but the farmer did not think that Jim was good enough for his daughter. To keep them apart, he sent her to live with her uncle on the other side of the country. Soon after she left, Jim got sick, and he wasted away and died. Everyone said he died of a broken heart. The farmer felt so guilty about Jim's death, he could not tell his daughter what had happened. She continued to think about Jim and the life they might have had together. One night, many weeks later, there was a knock on her uncle's door. When the girl opened the door, Jim was standing there. "Your father asked me to get you," he said. "I came on his best horse." So, this is taking place, I'm guessing, in the late 1800s. "Is there anything wrong?" she asked. "I don't know," he said. She packed a few things and they left. She rode behind him, clinging to his waist. Soon, she complained of a headache. "It aches something terrible," he told her. Soon he complained of a headache. "It aches something terrible," he told her. She put her hand on his forehead. "Why, you are cold as clay," she said. "I hope you are not ill." And she wrapped her handkerchief around his head. They traveled so swiftly that in a few hours they reached the farm. The girl quickly dismounted and knocked on the door. Her father was startled to see her. "Didn't you send for me?" she asked. "No, I didn't," he said. She turned to Jim, but he was gone, and so was the horse. They went to the stable to look for them. The horse was there. It was covered with sweat and trembling with fear, but there was no sign of Jim. Terrified, her father told her the truth about Jim's death. Then, quickly, he went to see Jim's parents. They decided to open his grave. The corpse was in its coffin, but around its head they found the girl's handkerchief. Yeah. There are lots of old folk tales about that kind of stuff happening. And I gotta be honest, I believe in them. You know, not all of them, but I believe it's happened. I believe that a spirit has in the past borrowed the body that they were in, that, you know, their body back, used it and gone back with a piece of memorabilia that they wanted to hang on to. Like, it makes so much sense, you know, especially in a case like this where he probably knew that, you know, he obviously did know that she thought he was still alive, and so he knew he could just go. Love it. Okay, so the next one is called The White Wolf. It's my wolf. Look how big it is. Look how big wolves' heads are compared to ours. They're amazing animals. Maybe I am a mythical creature. Maybe I'm a 72 Rothschild. Who knows? Okay, this story is called The White Wolf. The timber wolves around French Creek had gotten out of hand. There were so many wolves. The farmers could not stop them from killing their cattle and sheep. So, the state put out a bounty on them. It would pay a hunter $10 for every wolf pelt he turned in. A butcher in town named Bill Williams thought that was pretty good money. He stopped working as a butcher and started killing wolves. He was good at it. Every year he killed over 500 of them. That came to more than $5,000. It was quite a bit of money in those days. After 4 or 5 years, Bill had killed so many wolves that there were hardly any left in that area. So he retired, and he vowed never to harm another wolf because wolves made him so rich. Then one day a farmer reported that a white wolf had killed 2 of his sheep. He had shot it and hit it, but the bullets didn't have any effect. Soon that wolf was seen all over the countryside killing and running, but nobody could stop it. One night it came into Bill's yard and killed his pet cow. Bill forgot about his decision never to harm another wolf. That is such a silly thing to say. Like, he just forgot. No, he didn't forget. He decided, like, I'm gonna have to do this. Okay. Anyway, I'm sorry. He went into town the next morning and bought a young lamb for bait. He took it into the hills and tied it to a tree. Then he backed off about 50 yards and sat down under another tree. With his gun in his lap, he waited. When Bill didn't come back, his friends started looking for him. Finally, they found the lamb. It was still tied to a tree. It was hungry, but it was alive. Then they found Bill. He was still sitting against the other tree, but he was dead. His throat had been torn open. But there was no sign of a struggle. His gun hadn't been fired, and there were no tracks in the soil around him. As for the white wolf, it was never seen again. So I feel like the white wolf was the spirit of all the wolves that Bill Williamson had killed. And it only showed up to taunt him into coming out one last time so that they could get their revenge on him. And that's what I think that story was about. And I'm wondering, what do you guys think these stories are about, you know? Okay. I'm sorry I have to clear my throat so often. I just... difficult to talk. I hope that's not annoying. Okay. The next story is called The Haunted House. And the imagery is something I've thought about for a tattoo when I was younger, but I no longer think about it for a tattoo. Okay. Not that I wouldn't be thrilled to have it, but yeah. One time, a preacher went to see if he could put a haunt to rest at a home in his settlement. The house had been haunted for about 10 years. Several people had tried to stay there all night, but they always would get scared out by the haunt. So this preacher took his Bible and went to the house. He went on in, built himself a good fire, lit a lamp, sat there and started reading the Bible. Then, just before midnight, he heard something start up in the cellar, walking back and forth, back and forth. Then it sounded like somebody was trying to scream and got choked off. Super scary. Then there was a lot of thrashing around and struggling, and finally everything got quiet. The old preacher took up his Bible again, but before he could start reading, he heard footsteps coming up the cellar stairs. He sat watching the door to the cellar, and the footsteps kept coming closer and closer. He saw the doorknob turn, and when the door began to open, he jumped up and hollered, "What do you want?" The door shut back easy-like, and there wasn't a sound. The preacher was trembling a little, but he finally opened the Bible and read a while. Then he got up and laid the book on the chair and went to mending the fire. Then the haunt started walking again. Step, 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 up the cellar stairs. The old preacher sat... Where was I at? Up the cellar stairs. The old preacher sat watching the door, saw the doorknob turn, and the door open. It looked like a young woman. He backed up and said, "Who are you? What do you want?" The haunt sort of swayed like she didn't know what to do. Then she just faded out. I've seen a fade out of a spirit in my grandmother's house when I was maybe like, I think at the time first time I saw it I was 11 or 12, and I saw it again when I was 14, and I think that was the last time. But I kind of feel like the younger you are, the more chance you'll have to see some of those things, and especially if you kind of always believed in those things, or at least always been scared of them. If you're scared of it, it means you believe in it on some level, you know. Okay. And that's just my opinion, I suppose. So he turned his chair to where he could watch, and then he sat down and waited. It wasn't long before he heard the haunt start up again. Slowly, step, 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 closer and closer, step, 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 and it was right at the door. The preacher stood up and held his Bible out before him. Then the knob slowly turned and the door opened wide. This time the preacher spoke quiet-like. He said, in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, who are you and what do you want? The haunt came right across the room, straight to him, and took hold of his coat. It was a young woman about 20 years old. Her hair was torn and tangled, and the flesh was dropping off of her face, so he could see that the bones were part of her teeth. He could see her bones and parts of her teeth. She had no eyeballs, but there was a sort of blue light way back in the eye sockets, and she had no nose to her face. Then she started talking. It sounded like her voice was coming and going with the wind blowing through her skull. She told how her lover had killed her for money and buried her in the cellar. She said if the preacher would dig up her bones and bury her properly, she could rest. Then she told him to take the end joint of the little finger from her hand and lay it in the collection plate at the next church meeting, and he'd find out who had murdered her. And she said, if you come back here once more after that, you'll hear my voice after midnight, and I will tell you where my money is hid, and you can give it to the church. The haunt sobbed like she was tired, and she sunk down toward the floor and was gone. The preacher found her bones and buried them in the graveyard. The next Sunday, the preacher put the finger bone in the collection plate, and when a certain man happened to touch it, it stuck to his hand, because her spirit was attached to it, and she grabbed onto him. The man jumped up and rubbed and scraped and tore at the bone, trying to get it off. Then he went to screaming like he was going crazy. Well, he confessed to the murder, and they took him to jail. After the man was hung, so easy in those days, just the next day. After the man was hung, the preacher went back to that house one midnight, and the haunt's voice told him to dig under the hearth rock. He did, and he found a big sack of money, and where the haunt had held on to his coat, the print of those bony fingers was burned into the cloth. It never did come out. That's interesting. Alright, the last one of this chapter is called The Guests. And this is actually one of my favorites, and I've seen it, and it's happened to me in a dream before. I love that picture of that house. So let me tell you what I mean when I say it's happened to me in a dream before. Before I read these books, something just like this happened to me in a dream, and then I read these books when I was, like I say, like between 7 and 9 is when I first picked them up. And I read something very almost identical to what I had in my own personal dream. So, here we go. Again, and in my dream it was a hotel we stayed at. Well, I'll tell you my dream at the end, okay? If I forget to tell you my dream, just ask me in the comments. But I'll remember. I hope. A young man and his wife were on a trip to visit his mother. Usually they arrived in time for supper, but they had gotten a late start and now it was getting dark, so they decided to look for a place to stay overnight and go on in the morning. Just off the road they saw a small house in the woods. Maybe they rent rooms, the wife said, so they stopped to ask. Like you would just ask somebody, do you rent rooms? An elderly man and woman came to the door. They didn't rent rooms, they said, but they would be glad to have them stay overnight as their guests. They had plenty of room, and they would enjoy the company. The old woman made coffee and brought out some cake, and the four of them talked for a while. The young couple were taken to their room. They again explained that they wanted to pay for this, but the old man said that they wouldn't accept any money. The young couple got up early the next morning before their host had awakened. On the table near the front door, they left an envelope with some money in it. an envelope with some money in it. For the room. Sorry. Then they went on to the next town. They stopped in a restaurant and had breakfast. When they told the owner where they had stayed, she was shocked. "That can't be," he said. "That house burned into the ground, and the man and woman who lived there died in the fire." The young couple could not believe it, so they went back to the house. Only now there was no house. All they found was a burnt-out shell. They stood staring at the ruins, trying to understand what had happened. Then the woman screamed. In the rubble was a badly burned table, just like the one they had seen by the front door. On the table, the envelope they had left that morning was sitting there untouched, unburned, perfectly perfect. Okay, this is the dream I used to have when I was a kid. We used to stay at these random, like, cabins that you would rent. They're kind of like, just like, so you don't have, if you don't have, like, an RV to travel in, you just would, like, drive somewhere and stay in a cabin. Or if your RV was just too cramped or whatever, you could just get out of it and stay in a cabin. Or it's just better than staying in a tent, right, at a campground. So I had a dream that my family was staying at this little cabin, and we went, and I was like, "Mom, we have to go back because," and I was like, "Mom, we have to go back because I left my coat," or whatever. Sometimes it was my lunchbox in different dreams. Sometimes it was my coat. Sometimes it was my lunchbox. Sometimes it was my earrings. Sometimes it was a hair tie, okay? So, when we go back, there is no cabin. It's just a burnt out shell in a chimney, and that's it. But my coat is sitting on, like, just, like, the shell. It's just sitting there in the middle, untouched and unburned. And it's just like, oh, what? You know? And, like, nothing is hot and cherried out and flaming or anything, so it's like it's an old burnt out shell, you know what I'm saying? Anyway, I had that dream for a long time before I even read this, so the story's always been, like, pretty creepy to me. So, I hope you enjoyed having tea and crumpets with me and reading scary stories collected by Alvin, Schwartz, and the amazing Stephen Gammell for the drawings. So when we come back, we will be reading a chapter on They Eat Your Eyes, They Eat Your Nose. There are scary stories about all kinds of things. The ones told here are about a grave, a witch, a man who liked to swim, a hunting trip, and a market basket. And I think the market basket one's about a witch too. There also is one about worms eating a corpse. Your corpse. So that's a pretty good one. I'm looking forward to reading it with you guys. So make sure you come back and visit me for that. Jen, the Taxidermy Witch. Reading scary stories to tell in the dark. Bye-bye.